talk to broadcaster Iain Dale and former Labour Home Secretary Jacqui Smith about all of these stories and their predictions that are making the news today in a minute. But first, let's just concentrate for a few minutes on that scramble that holidaymakers in Portugal are now facing to get back to the UK before this country moves, that country moves to the amber list, as you say, at 4 a.m. on Tuesday.
We're joined now by travel consultant Paul Charles from Malta, and also Dr. Amir Khan is here in the studio with us as well. Good morning to you, Paul Charles. Thanks for joining us this morning. I mean, you know, Malta, where you are, it was thought that that was going to move onto the green list. Portugal has now moved on to the amber list, so it wasn't quite what people expected, and also not quite the notice that people expected to get either.
No, I'm sad to say that there seems to have been a bit of an incoherent policy from government, and certainly one that's inconsistent. Just 3 weeks ago, they were saying to people, book your holiday to Portugal and elsewhere, it's on the green list, go for it. And now they're turning around and saying, well, we've spotted a few infections, possible variants in Portugal, now we've got to rein back. And this obviously is a totally inconsistent approach. It doesn't help put confidence back into the travel sector, which is badly needed. And now ministers are not even answering why they're not adding to the green list when there are so many countries around the world which could be safely added to their green list.
Yeah, and it puts people in such a difficult situation, doesn't it? Those who are out in Portugal at the moment, those who have trips booked, what can they do? Do they still have to go, or are they able to rearrange, or does it just depend on the tour operator?
Well, it's not illegal to travel to Portugal. You can visit family, for example. You can go for weddings or funerals, essential reasons, of course. So if you've already booked, then it could be you could still do that trip. It all depends whether you're prepared to self-isolate when you come back and indeed pay for the costs of testing, which are pretty expensive, as we know. But do not cancel your trip. Wait for your airline or tour operator or travel agent to contact you and let you know what's going to be happening. Because if you cancel it, you're obviously, you're changing the contract and you're changing the terms. So wait for you to be contacted by your agent, operator or airline. And of course, the industry needs bookings to be coming in for the summer. We need ministers to be really clear now on what's going to happen in July and August. Are they going to allow people to go away? Are they going to expand the green list? That's what we need to hear from ministers this morning.
I sense from your first reply that you think the government's overreacted as far as Portugal's concerned, which flies in the face of what our programme doctor is going to be saying in a second. He thinks that they've done the right thing. But I sense, you chose your words carefully, but I sense that you think this is an overreaction and Portugal should have stayed on the green list. Am I right?
Richard, it's right to be cautious. Of course, the government needs to be cautious during these unprecedented times, but they need to strike a balance between reopening in the UK on the 21st of June and still enabling travel and the economy to be moving forward sensibly and safely. And Portugal, they should have given it more time. They talked about a green watch list a few weeks ago. Why hasn't Portugal been moved from green to the green watch list to give people more time to work out their plans, rather than having to rush back, spend a fortune on flights before next Tuesday? It flies in the face of all the advice they were giving and the reason why they set up the traffic light system in the first place. And I think that system is now seriously under question.
Every coffin has its final nail in the end. How far away are we in the travel industry, let alone the airline industry, but in the travel industry, the British travel industry, to that last nail going in the coffin?
Well, the travel sector has been pulled from pillar to post for at least 12 months now and dogged by inconsistency in terms of government policy. Why are we in a worse position this summer than we were last summer, when we've got half the country double jabbed? It doesn't make any sense at all. If you look at the Americans, they're all travelling once they've been double jabbed. They're travelling to Mexico and the Caribbean. They're having a whale of a time, safely and responsibly. So the sector needs a good summer this summer. If it doesn't get it and the summer is squeezed, then we're talking tens of thousands of job losses again across the sector. And that's really not what the Prime Minister wants, I'm sure.
Stay with us, because we're going to turn to Dr. Amir now. I have to say, he's just echoed something, as I said earlier, that my wife Judy said to me last night. She looked at me as the scales fell and said, hang on, We've been double jabbed. You know, most of the adult populations at least had one jab. Many have had two. Why are we in a worse position in terms of travel now than we were a year ago at this point, when the idea of a vaccine was still just a theoretical one? Now we've got multiple vaccines. Why are we in a worse position?
Well, let's go back to last year. We didn't have vaccines, and people were allowed to travel over the summer. Then we saw a huge surge in cases from September onwards. Most of that was down to foreign travel and mixing over that.
Yes, but we had no vaccines then.
No, but then we saw lots of people die over the winter. We're not in a worse position now in terms of numbers of deaths and hospitalisations. We might be...
No, she meant freedom of movement.
Freedom of movement, yes, certainly, because we have to be cautious. We have to be. All the mistakes we've made in the past is because we have reacted too late. And I have problems with the traffic light system. I really do. I think it's ambiguous. I think it leads to problems like this. And I do have huge empathy for people who have booked trips to Portugal, who are there already, and the airline industry. I really, really do.
Of course you do. But what I'm sensing from you, I got it from Dr. Hillary, who was on the programme yesterday. What I'm sensing is a lack of trust in the vaccines, even though that they are very effective. We know that. And we know they're effective against the Delta or the Indian variant. We understand that. We just don't seem, from the professional sector, we don't seem to be hearing the kind of, not gung-ho confidence, but calm, cool confidence that we're getting there. There doesn't seem to be faith in the vaccine.
Well, the professional sector, the scientists and doctors, will never be gung-ho about anything. No. We'll always be carefully cautious and look at the data before we make any statements. And the data, as you know, says one dose of either of the vaccines or any of the vaccines doesn't give you enough protection against the Delta variant, and you need both. And yes, we've done well. We've got half of the adult population vaccinated, but there's still half yet to be vaccinated. And that's millions of people. That's millions of people.
But do you think if you've had the double vaccine, you should be... I mean, he mentioned the situation in America. If once you've been double vaccinated, surely it's safe to travel.
It probably is for you, but it might not be when you come back for other people.
Why? Because you bring the virus back with you?
Yes, yes.
Is there much evidence for that? That if you've been double vaccinated, you're still a carrier of the virus?
There's increasing evidence that having 2 doses of the vaccine reduces transmission, but it doesn't completely reduce transmission.
Well, it never will, though, will it?
Well, that's why we need to vaccinate the rest of the population to protect them as well. So it is a balancing act. You can't just focus on one group of people who have been vaccinated and forget about the others. And the same applies to anything in medicine. Really.
So when we've all been double vaccinated, pretty much, you're saying to me that that is the point, that we can actually travel and we can get rid of all the restrictions once we've all been double vaccinated?
Provided those vaccines protect...
There?
Well, there has to be. There has to be.
No, go on.
Provided those vaccines protect you against any new variants that have come across.
And that's the issue. That's one of the things that could be an unknown, isn't it? That actually they're trying to prevent against. OK, Dr. Amir, thanks very much for talking us through that. Let's pick up now with Jacqui and Iain. Thanks very much. Obviously, you've been listening to all of that. I mean, Jacqui, when it comes to how this watch list has been managed, you know, the government have faced accusations of being late on various other things. On this, despite the fact they said, we'll give you warning about making changes, they're literally saying to holiday makers, right, if you're not back by Tuesday, 4 a.m, then that's it, you have to quarantine. It is a sudden about turn, isn't it?
It is, and it does go back, as you've pointed out, on what Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, said, I think, on this programme about there being a green watch list. Although I'm not too condemning of him for that, because one of my criticisms of the traffic light system is precisely what does amber mean? You know, Iain and I were discussing it on the podcast, talking about, you know, the old amber gamblers. People have been really, really unclear about that. Now, at least this has got the benefit of clarity for people. Although there are still some people, I think, who are saying they're going to go, but then they're going to isolate when they come back, because, of course, that seems to be allowed.
And why shouldn't they? If they do isolate when they come back and they do test, then they're no threat to anybody, are they?
Partly, as Dr. Amir, I think, was very sensibly saying, it depends why this is happening. You know, let's not be too complacent. Yesterday, in the UK, we saw the number of cases at the highest level that it's been since March. So we're not out of this yet. And I think it is right for the government to be cautious. I just wish they could communicate more clearly than they are at the moment.
We do know that not everybody isolates, even though they're supposed to, because, you know, there were surveys done, weren't there? The number of the people that weren't going to do it. Iain, what do you make of this, you know, the whole system? Like Jacqui says, even having this kind of green, amber, red. Should they have just been clearer from the start? Because it's hard, isn't it? People look forward to holidays, they've pinned their hopes on it, they've booked them, they've wanted to have something to look forward to. And then to either have it snatched away from them or to mean that it's going to be so much more difficult for them to come back. It's difficult.
Well, I think a lot of people have booked holidays to Portugal, even though they were warned that things could change. I mean, we all know that countries can move from one category to another. That you can still go to Portugal. Nobody's preventing you from going. They're just saying, well, when you come back, you have to isolate for 10
Imagine
days.
if you have to turn around to your boss now and say, oh, you know, I've got a week's holiday and sorry, I'm not going to be in for 10 days.
I'm sorry, we all have to
after
take
that.
responsibility for our own decisions, don't we? But if you think back to this time last year, Boris Johnson was being possibly rightly criticised for being a bit too gung-ho. Now he's being criticised for being too safety first. Well, there isn't really anywhere in between that. And there's no sort of nuance here. You either are safety first or you just sort of let everyone do what they want. But now, I think the key thing here is surely we want all these restrictions to be lifted on June the 21st. I think that is what has driven this, and understandably so. But having said that, the communications of it yesterday, yet again, was a complete cluster shambles, wasn't it? I mean, and this every time you think they're being paid. These communications professionals in government are being paid lots of money, and yet virtually every time, apart from on the vaccine rollout, they've mucked up the communication. So there's mixed messaging, so people can't be blamed for getting angry.
Just before we leave the whole Amber question, if you'd booked a holiday to Portugal, would you go on Amber?
No.
You wouldn't?
No.
Because it's too much trouble?
Well, I wouldn't. I've just made the decision not to go abroad anyway this year because I just think, well, what's the point? Particularly when you've got this lovely weather at the moment. Why don't you stay here?
Also, Iain, I don't think you were quite clear because I think ministers have said you shouldn't travel if it's on Amber. But people don't necessarily hear that. They hear, I could travel and then I could come back.
But that's where the Amber thing is the problem.
Yeah.
We understand Robert Jedrick's been talking about it this morning.
Well,
and he's already been saying in interviews that you shouldn't be travelling to Amber or Red countries. But actually, it's difficult if you've already got one booked, isn't it, to then unpick all of that?
Well, it goes back to what Jackie said. People think Amber means get set, whereas actually, you read the highway code, it means stop.
OK. You mentioned the staycation syndrome, but, you know, 90% of British holiday centres, hotels, bed and
you'll be lucky to get one.
90% are booked up. They're virtually all gone. I was in Cornwall last week. You couldn't get a meal out anywhere. I mean, unless you'd booked earlier. And when I say earlier, I mean about a month ago.
Jackie has a solution to this.
This is when I return to my lovely caravan in North West Wales, and Iain goes, "Shut up about your caravan," but he's not saying that this year, is he? Oh no.
Was it
You'll be visiting.
They'll be knocking on the door. Saying, let me in. I need a holiday.
Caravans are rocking. Don't come knocking.
Was it you I was stuck behind on the M4 last week? That was you. I thought it was.
My caravan is static.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Listen, let's move on from the caravan swiftly. Is it, do you think, Jackie, all about this, you know, June the 21st, and that's what they are sort of wanting to make sure that they prioritise, that they can lift the restrictions in the way that they're hoping everybody wants to, that they'll have that good news message for everybody?
Well, here's quite mixed messages as well, but I think you're right, Charlotte. I think the government is absolutely desperate. Despite what they've said about data, not dates, they're really desperate that on June the 21st we can have good news and things can be lifted. But they're also trying to be slightly cautious about that as well. I think it would be very, very difficult. It might not be wrong, but it would be very difficult for the government if on the 14th of June they say, we're actually not that confident about the levels of cases, the variants, and we're therefore going to maintain those restrictions. They'd be in a really difficult position if they have to do that. And the poll boost
that they've had on the vaccine rollout, which has been massive, it's sort of Boris Johnson's Falklands factor, I think. I think that will start to disappear after June 21st if they don't stick to that date. And I think that's partly what yesterday was about.
Let's just quickly talk about this syndrome of one rule for them and one for the rest of us. If any of us got pinged later today by track and trace, and we'd been told we'd been in contact with somebody who was proven positive, we'd have to isolate for 2 weeks. That'd be that. Not Michael Gove. He's been pinged, but all he has to do is a regular test. What do you make of that?
So this is a pilot scheme for workplaces.
Oh, how convenient.
That Michael Gove happens to be taking part in.
Well, I think Keir Starmer would feel a little bit cheesed off because he seems to have spent a lot of time in his bedroom when he's been pinged, quite rightly abiding by the rules. So, I mean, OK, if this is legitimate, fine. But it is a little bit confusing again, isn't it? Because I think, as you rightly say, Richard, people will go, oh, just a minute, I thought if I was pinged, I had to stay at home. But
exactly.
Well, surely, though, the vaccine rollout means that there has to be some sort of change in the system, because if you've been double jabbed and you're pinged, you're still, I mean, I'm right in saying, aren't I, that you are still at risk because the vaccines don't protect you for 100%, but you're unlikely to be hospitalised, you're unlikely to die. So I guess that's the reason that they're looking at a new system.
But no vaccine is perfect, is it? No vaccine works 100%. The polio vaccine isn't 100%. Nothing works completely.
No, but there's a lot less. There's no cases of polio. You know, that's not in the community. It's not spread in the same way that COVID is right now. You know, measles isn't 100%, polio isn't, but we don't have huge cases of them, and we're not worried about that spreading to the unvaccinated population.
Can we just quickly... Have we got any more time on this item? Oh, very quickly then. Come on, really quickly. Front page Daily Mail today. They're sort of doing a Jackie Kennedy on Carrie Johnson, I suppose, or now Carrie Simons. You know, is she now dressed fit to be Britain's First Lady? This is all a bit 1960s sexism, isn't it?
Have a look.
So it's here, Carrie's G7 outfits to make her the First Lady of Fashion. So they've done a whole double-page spread on what she'll be wearing. She's actually hiring her clothes, apparently.
You can't win with the Mail. When I can remember a time when I was a minister, when the French came for a big visit, the Mail did a whole double page where they said, look at this frumpy English female minister, look at this glamorous French female minister. Apparently, I was...
No, I never let it be
harsh.
Did that get to you, or had by then you...
Well, clearly, it's 10 years on, Richard, and I'm still talking about it.
I think the trouble is, as much as we might look at the front cover and sort of think there are far more important things to be talking about than what Carrie's going to be wearing, we have all, obviously, you know, well, I've looked at it anyway, had a quick flick through to see what she's got lined up, I know.
Charlotte, you're so right. I say always, and that a bit sex, I looked at every picture, went through it, so actually the Mail is feeding an appetite. You know, we are interested in this stuff.
We are.
Still.
But sustainable fashion for hiring them all. There we are.
Let's have a look at the Prime Minister's fashion sense, or in fact, let's not.
Well, doesn't he wear the same suit quite a lot of the time? That was the rumour, wasn't it?
Boris Johnson's fashion sense is a bit like that Italian sculpture. It's invisible. It's not there. Lovely to see you both. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. And I think you look fabulous, Jackie.
Thank you, Richard.
Never mind what that
is. And? How sexist of you.
We'll talk.